The private jet door opened, and 200 wedding guests turned to stare. I stepped onto the tarmac in a $22,000 dress, holding the hands of two 5-year-old twins my ex-husband didn't know I'd found. Behind me, a billionaire smiled. 3 miles away, my ex-husband was about to discover that the woman he destroyed 4 years ago had just become his worst nightmare. You see, Garrett made one critical mistake. When he stole my embryos and created children without my permission, he thought I'd never find out. He thought I was too broke, too broken, too beaten down to fight back. He invited me to his wedding as a final humiliation. Proof that he'd won. But what he didn't know was this. I'd spent 18 months building an army, a billionaire with unlimited resources, a forensic accountant who'd uncovered his fraud, an FBI agent who'd proven he forged my signature, and a mother's rage that had been simmering for 5 years. The wedding was in 3 hours, and I was about to ruin his life. But first, let me tell you how a waitress who couldn't afford groceries ended up arriving at a society wedding in a $70 million jet. This is the story of how I took back what was stolen from me. Stay with me, because what happened next? He never saw it coming. The Gulfstream G650 touched down at Westchester County Airport at exactly 2:47 p.m. on June 15th, my ex-husband's wedding day. I stepped onto the tarmac wearing a $22,000 Valentino dress I didn't pay for, my hands holding two 5-year-old children Garrett didn't know I'd found. Behind me, the third richest man in New York smiled like he'd just won a chess match. And 3 miles away, my ex-husband was about to discover that the woman he destroyed 4 years ago had just become his worst nightmare. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a waitress who couldn't afford toilet paper ended up arriving at a society wedding in a private jet worth $70 million. This is the story of how I took back what was stolen from me. And trust me, he never saw it coming. 6 weeks earlier, I woke up to the sound of my neighbor's dog barking through paper-thin walls. My studio apartment in Brooklyn measured 380 square feet. The rent was $1,100 a month, which ate half my income from 2 jobs. I worked the morning shift at Pete's Diner from 7 to 3, then the evening shift at Barnes & Noble from 5 to 10. On good days, I slept 6 hours. On bad days, 4. That Tuesday morning, I had exactly $17 in my checking account until Friday's paycheck. Breakfast was a day-old bagel I'd brought home from the diner and black coffee so strong it could strip paint. I checked myself in the bathroom mirror. Dark circles under my eyes. Gray roots showing through my dye job because salon visits cost money I didn't have. Tired eyes that had seen too much. I was 38 years old and I looked 50. The building's superintendent knocked on my door at 7:15. "Certified letter for you, Miss Monroe." I signed for it, confused. Who sends certified mail? Inside was a cream-colored envelope, heavy cardstock with embossed gold lettering. "Mr. Garrett Michael Sullivan and Miss Tessa Lynn Brightwell request the honor of your presence at their marriage ceremony. Saturday, June 15th, 2024. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The estate at Winding Hills, Greenwich, Connecticut." Inside was a handwritten note in Garrett's familiar script. "Becca, I know this might seem strange after all these years, but Tessa and I both believe in moving forward with grace and maturity. We think it's important that the twins see their father's past and present come together in a healthy way. We'd be honored if you'd join us. No hard feelings. Garrett." I read it 3 times. "Twins? What twins? Garrett doesn't have children. We couldn't have children." That's why the memory hit me like a physical blow. Fertility clinics, negative pregnancy tests, the doctor's sympathetic face saying, "I'm sorry, it's not viable." I spoke out loud to my empty apartment. "What the fuck is he talking about?" I grabbed my phone and called my sister. Diane answered on the 3rd ring, background noise of her kids screaming. "Becca, it's 7:30 in the morning. What's wrong?" "Garrett invited me to his wedding." "That son of a bitch, after what he did to you, he mentioned twins," I interrupted. "He said the twins should see their father's past and present." Silence on the other end. "Wait, Garrett has kids?" "Apparently, but I've never heard about any children. Not in 3 years." "Maybe he's lying," Diane said. "You know how he is. Everything's for show." "Maybe. But why invite me? Why mention kids I've never met?" "Are you actually considering going?" I stared at the invitation. at Garrett's handwriting, at the date, June 15th, our anniversary. He'd chosen our anniversary for his wedding to someone else. I need to know what he's talking about him, I said finally. After we hung up, I sat on my bed and Googled Garrett Sullivan children. The results loaded slowly on my cheap phone. Society page photos. Garrett and Tessa at charity events, both smiling, both beautiful, both everything I wasn't anymore. Then I saw it. One photo from 8 months ago. Garrett with two small children at a park. The caption read, "Real estate mogul. Garrett Sullivan enjoys quality time with his twins, Emma and Ethan, at Greenwich Point." I zoomed in on the photo. The children, boy and girl, identical faces, approximately 4 or 5 years old. The boy had dark hair and green eyes. He looked like Garrett. The girl had dark hair and green eyes too. She looked like me. My stomach dropped. I stared at that little girl's face for 10 minutes straight, comparing it to my own baby photos that I kept on my phone. The same nose, the same chin, the same expression. That's when I knew I needed help. I found a private investigator through Google. Affordable PI NYC. The listing said $500 retainer, $100 per hour after that. I had exactly $500 in my savings account, my emergency fund, the money I'd been saving for 3 years in case I got sick and couldn't work. I called the number. A man answered. "Marcus Taylor Investigations. How can I help you?" "I need information about someone, my ex-husband. He apparently has children I didn't know about." "Okay, what do you need to know?" "Who their mother is, when they were born, how he has them." "That'll be 500 retainer, 100 per hour after that. Could take 48 to 72 hours. I only have 500 total." He sighed. "Then I'll work fast." The next 48 hours were hell. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Just stared at that photo, zooming in on the little girl's face, comparing it to mine. I called Garrett's mother. No answer. Voicemail full. I took a bus to Greenwich, 2 hours each way, watched Garrett's house from a park bench like some kind of stalker. I saw them, the twins, playing in the yard with a nanny. The girl laughed and the sound carried across the lawn. It was my laugh, the same one I had as a child. Diane confirmed it when I showed her old videos. On Friday morning, my phone rang. Marcus Taylor. I answered on the first ring. "Did you find something?" "You need to sit down for this." "I'm sitting." He took a heavy breath. The twins, Emma and Ethan Sullivan, were born 5 years ago at Greenwich Hospital. Birth certificates list Garrett Sullivan as the father. Mother is listed as confidential surrogate by a sealed adoption. Surrogate? He used a surrogate? That's what the records say. But here's where it gets complicated. What do you mean? I called in a favor with a contact at the fertility clinic Garrett used. Connecticut Reproductive Associates. My heart pounded. And? They have a file on you. Silence. What? Rebecca Monroe, formerly Rebecca Sullivan. You and Garrett underwent IVF treatment 6 years ago. You created 6 viable embryos. They were cryopreserved, frozen, pending future use. My voice shook. We divorced before we ever used them. The lawyer said they'd be destroyed. They weren't. The revelation came fast. According to clinic records, Garrett Sullivan signed authorization for embryo transfer 5 years ago. 2 embryos were implanted in a gestational surrogate. Both took. Twin pregnancy. Emma and Ethan were born March 3rd, 5 years ago. I couldn't breathe. But I never signed authorization. I know, I'm looking at the signature page right now. It's forged. I screamed into the phone. He used my eggs? He made children from my eggs without my permission? Yes. Those are my biological children. Yes. And he stole them? Legally, it's complicated, but morally, yes, he stole them. I collapsed. Panic attack, hyperventilating. Diane, who had come over to wait with me, called 911. The ambulance arrived within minutes. Blood pressure 180/110, dangerously high, key abnormal. Stress-induced arrhythmia. They transported me to Brooklyn Methodist Hospital. In the emergency room, a doctor tried to calm me down. "Miss Monroe, you're experiencing acute stress response. We need to stabilize you." Between sobs, I told him, "He took my babies. He made babies from my body without asking me. The doctor exchanged a look with a nurse. Who did? My ex-husband. He stole my embryos. I'm going to recommend psychiatric consultation, I screamed. I'm not crazy. He stole my embryos. My children exist and I never knew. They administered a sedative. Everything went black. When I woke up in the hospital bed, Diane was sitting beside me. You've been out for 6 hours, she said quietly. The twins are real. Marcus sent me all the documentation. Becca, this is insane. A nurse came in to check my vitals. Blood pressure still high, but better. They wanted to keep me overnight for observation. Diane stayed with me. She'd called out of work, arranged childcare for her own kids, just to sit with me. What are you going to do? She asked. I don't know. I need a lawyer. She pulled out her phone, but I already called one. Legal aid clinic gave me a name. Family law specialist. Claire Montgomery. She does pro bono work. We met with Claire Montgomery on Monday morning and in her small office in downtown Brooklyn. She was 50, sharp-eyed, no nonsense. She reviewed Marcus's documents for 20 minutes without speaking. Finally, she looked up. This is extraordinary. I've never seen anything like this. Can I get them back? They're my biological children. Claire chose her words carefully. Embryo law is murky, very murky. In New York, embryos created during marriage are considered joint property unless there's a specific agreement. The divorce decree said they'd be destroyed. But you signed a waiver during property division. She showed me a document. Page 47 of our divorce settlement. Both parties relinquish all claims to genetic material, embryonic or otherwise, stored at any medical facility. Disposition of said materials shall be at the sole discretion of the party initiating storage. I don't remember signing that. You were probably going through dozens of documents. Easy to miss. Diane leaned forward. But he forged her signature at the fertility clinic. That's criminal. But proving it? That's hard. The clinic's signature authorization is 5 years old. Chain of custody issues. I felt my last hope dying. So I have no rights to my own biological children? I didn't say that, but this will be a fight. A long, expensive, public fight. She laid it out bluntly. Here's what you're up against. 1, Garrett has been their legal father for 5 years. Courts favor established parental relationships. 2, you signed a waiver, even if you didn't understand it. 3, he'll argue you abandoned the embryos. 4, he has money for top lawyers. You don't. 5, even if you win, the case could take 2 to 3 years. What are my chances? Honestly, 50-50, maybe 60-40 if we can prove forgery. And if I lose, you'll have no legal relationship to your biological children forever. We left the office in silence. On the sidewalk, Diane asked, what are you going to do? I stared at the invitation still in my purse. I'm going to that wedding. Why? Because I need to meet my children, and I need to look Garrett in the eye and make him tell me why. But I had no money for a lawyer, no money for a custody fight, no money for anything. That's when I remembered Dominic. 18 months earlier, I'd met him at Pete's Diner during my graveyard shift. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. Only 2 customers, drunk college kids and 1 man in the corner booth. Mid-40s, expensive watch, reading a worn paperback. The Count of Monte Cristo. His coffee cup was empty. He'd been sitting there 3 hours. I refilled it without asking. He looked up. Thank you. Rough night. Rough year, actually. A small smile. You? I laughed bitterly. Rough life. I'm Dominic. Becca. Do you always work the graveyard shift? Only when I need to eat. He studied me with intelligent eyes. What's your story, Becca? You don't want to hear my story. I've got time. He gestured to the empty diner. Seems like you do too. So I sat doing breaking every policy in Pete's employee handbook, and I told him everything. Married at 28, Garrett was charming, ambitious, successful. Years of trying for a baby, IVF, miscarriages, ectopic pregnancy, Garrett's affair with Tessa, my colleague at the gallery, the divorce where I lost everything. The house, the savings, my career. 4 years later, here I was. 2 gems. Studio apartment. therapy bills, antidepressants. Dominic listened, didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes, just listened. When I finished, he said, "Your ex-husband sounds like a coward." I was surprised by his bluntness. Most people say it takes two to end a marriage. Most people are wrong. Some men destroy their wives and call it growing apart. We talked until 4 a.m. He left a $200 tip on a $6 check. He came back the next week. Same booth, same book. Then the next week, and the next. A friendship formed. 6 months later, he revealed who he was. Dominic Ashford, founder of Ashford Analytics, a social media data company. Net worth $4.2 billion. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Because everyone treats me differently when they know. You talk to me like a person." I needed that. 12 months after we met, he paid off my credit card debt anonymously. $8,000. I found out from my bank statement and confronted him. You can't just consider it an investment. In what? In someone who deserves a fighting chance. Now, standing outside Claire's office, I pulled out my phone. I called Dominic. "Dom, I need your help." His voice was immediately concerned. "What happened?" "Can you meet me? Now?" "Where are you?" "The diner. I'll be there in 20 minutes. At Pete's Diner in our usual booth, I told Dominic everything. The invitation, the twins, the stolen embryos, the forged signature, the 50-50 legal odds. He was silent for a full minute after I finished. Then he said, "He used your embryos without consent." "Yes. That's not just illegal, that's sociopathic. The lawyer says it'll take years to fight, and I might lose." "So what do you want to do?" "I want to go to his wedding." "Wait, Mayo, because I need to meet my children. I need to look them in the eye and know." My voice broke. "I need to know if they're okay." "And then?" "I don't know. I can't think past that." Dominic leaned forward. "Okay, then let's think past that together." "What do you mean?" "You said the lawyer needs time and money to fight this." "I don't have either, but I do." The next day, I found myself on the 47th floor of Ashford Analytics headquarters in Tribeca. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. I felt out of place in my Target jeans and worn sneakers. Dominic had assembled a team. Robert Mitchell, head of security. Former FBI Cybercrimes Division. Claire Montgomery, my attorney, now officially retained by Dominic. Sarah Mitchell, forensic accountant with 20 years of experience. And me, the client. Dominic addressed the room. "Here's what we know. Garrett Sullivan used Becca's genetic material without consent to create 2 children. He forged documents. He committed identity theft. And he's been raising those children for 5 years while Becca didn't even know they existed." Robert spoke. "That's criminal. Multiple felonies." Claire interjected. "But proving it in family court is different from criminal court. The standard of evidence." Dominic cut her off. "Then we don't fight in family court." "Not yet." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "We fight in the court of public opinion first. And we fight in Garrett's world. Money and reputation." Over the next 72 hours, Dominic's team worked around the clock. Sarah, the forensic accountant, discovered the truth about Garrett's company, Sullivan Properties LLC. Garrett claimed it was worth $15 million. The reality? Negative $3.2 million. Underwater, bankrupt, $8 million in debt, commercial mortgages, personal guarantees, 4 properties in foreclosure. The wedding itself, funded entirely by Tessa's father, Richard Brightwell, a venture capitalist worth $80 million. Venue cost $120,000. Ring $85,000. Total wedding expenses $350,000. All paid by Richard. And there was more. Richard Brightwell was investing $5 million in Sullivan Properties. The investment was set to close on June 16th, the day after the wedding. "He's committing investment fraud," Sarah said. "If Brightwell knew the real numbers, he'd never invest." Robert, the security expert, made his own discoveries. He legally subpoenaed clinic records, had them analyzed by a handwriting expert. Becca's authorization signature was forged. 98% probability. Garrett signed my name. Robert also found the surrogate, Jennifer Hayes, 38 years old, Connecticut resident. She'd been paid $60,000. Standard rate. She'd signed an NDA, but it was illegally broad. She was willing to testify. Most damning of all, Robert recovered deleted emails from Garrett's account. One to the clinic director. My ex-wife is unstable. She won't respond to consent requests. I need to move forward without her. That was fraud. Clear, undeniable fraud. Dominic laid out the documents. We have him, criminally, civilly, publicly. But the wedding is in 3 weeks, I said. The investment closes the day after. If we wait, we don't wait. The strategy was simple but devastating. Phase 1, legal, file emergency custody motion, DNA test to prove biological parentage, get temporary visitation rights. Phase 2, financial. Expose Garrett's bankruptcy to Richard Brightwell. Show him the fraud. Brightwell pulls investment. Garrett's company collapses. Phase 3, public. Attend the wedding. Bring the twins if court grants temporary custody. Arrive in a way that cannot be ignored. Let Garrett's social circle see the truth. He's built his life on lies, Dominic said. We're going to shatter the illusion. I looked at him. Why are you doing this? This is so far beyond... Because men like Garrett think they're untouchable. They hurt people and walk away. No consequences. I've watched it happen my whole life. In business, in society, in families. I have money and power. And if I can't use it to stop one of them, what's the point? He paused. You're a good man, Dom, I said quietly. He shook his head. I'm a ruthless man who happens to like you, but I'll take the compliment. The emergency custody motion was filed on day 3. We went to court on day 7. Claire stood before the judge. Your Honor, my client has reason to believe the minor children, Emma and Ethan Sullivan, are her biological offspring, created via IVF during her marriage to the respondent. Garrett's attorney, Rick Morrison, was slick and expensive. Your Honor, this is absurd. Miss Monroe is harassing my client. These children were legally adopted. Then a DNA test will prove that, won't it? Claire said. The judge ordered DNA tests for all parties. Results in 72 hours. Day 6. Results came back. 99.9% biological match. Emma and Ethan were my biological children. Day 7. Emergency custody hearing. The judge looked at the DNA results with something like shock. Miss Monroe, these results are extraordinary. Mr. Sullivan, do you have an explanation for how your adopted children are biologically related to your ex-wife? Garrett stammered. We used a surrogate during our marriage. It was, during your marriage, then why are they listed as adopted? His attorney jumped in. There were legal complications, Your Honor. The gestational carrier, Claire cut him off. There were no complications. My client never consented. Her signature was forged. She presented the handwriting analysis. The judge reviewed the documents, frowning. This is highly irregular. I'm granting Miss Monroe temporary supervised visitation, effective immediately. Full custody hearing scheduled in 30 days. Outside the courthouse, I cried with relief. I get to meet them. Oh my God, I get to meet my babies. Diane hugged me. You did it. Dominic spoke quietly. This is just the first step. Day 10. Supervised Visitation Center in White Plains. I arrived early, nervous, shaking. Social worker present. Small room with toys, table, chairs. The door opened. 2 children entered, holding a nanny's hands. Emma, 5 years old, dark curly hair, green eyes, pink dress, shawl. She looked exactly like my childhood photos. Ethan, 5 years old, dark straight hair, green eyes, blue shirt. Curious, he looked like Garrett but had my expressions. The social worker spoke. Emma, Ethan, this is Rebecca. You can call her Miss Becca. I knelt to their level, tears streamed down my face. Hi, sweethearts. Emma hid behind the nanny. Are you our mommy? My heart stopped. Yes, baby, I am. Ethan was suspicious. Daddy said we don't have a mommy. Well, you do. You have me. The visit lasted 2 hours. We played with blocks, drew pictures. Emma sat in my lap after 30 minutes. Ethan showed me his toy cars. Both called me Miss Becca. Before they left, Emma asked, will you come back? Yes, I'll come back every time they let me. Good, I like you. In the car with Dominic afterward, I sobbed. They're perfect. They're so perfect. I know. I missed 5 years, 5 years of their lives. But you have now, and you'll have the future. I can't lose them again. Dom, I can't. You won't, I promise. But he was wrong. Day 12, 2 weeks before the wedding. My phone rang. Garrett. First time we'd spoken directly in years, I answered. What do you want? His voice was cold. Congratulations. You found them. You stole them from me. I gave them life. You gave up. I never gave up anything. You forged my signature. He laughed. Prove it. I already did. The court gave you supervised visits. 2 hours a week. Congratulations. You're a babysitter. The full hearing will take months, maybe years. And you know what judges see? A stable father with a home, a family, resources, and a broke, unstable ex-wife who shows up after 5 years with a billionaire sugar daddy. Dom is not. Save it. Everyone knows what you are. Fury rose in my chest. What I am is their mother. Biology isn't motherhood. I've raised them. I've been there for every nightmare, every fever, every scraped knee. You're a stranger. My voice broke. Because you stole them from me. You signed away your rights. You walked away. The divorce decree said they'd be destroyed. But you signed the waiver. Page 47. Remember? I didn't know. Ignorance isn't a defense, Becca. Silence. Then he delivered his ultimatum. Here's how this ends. You drop the custody case. You stay away from my wedding. You stay away from my children. And I'll let you keep your supervised visits. Go to hell. Or you keep fighting, and I'll make sure you lose everything. Your reputation, your duty, your apartment, your dignity. And when it's over, you'll have nothing. Not even visits. He hung up. I threw my phone across the room. Dominic had been listening on speaker. He's bluffing. He's not. I was right. Day 13. Garrett went public. A press release sent to all major outlets. Statement from Garrett Sullivan. It is with deep sadness that I must address false allegations made by my ex-wife, Rebecca Monroe. After our divorce 4 years ago, we legally and ethically used a gestational surrogate to have children, a decision made jointly during our marriage. Miss Monroe was fully informed and consented. However, she has since developed an unhealthy obsession with disrupting my family. I have attempted to include her in the children's lives out of compassion, but her behavior has become erratic and concerning. I am prioritizing the safety and well-being of my children above all else. The media ate it up. New York Post, real estate mogul's ex-wife tries to claim his kids. Page 6, bitter ex or rightful mother. The Sullivan custody battle. Daily Mail, Garrett Sullivan's ex-wife claims billionaire boyfriend will help her steal his children. Social media exploded. Twitter trends, Sullivan custody, deadbeat mom, gold digger alert. Comments flooded in. She didn't want them during the marriage. Now she sees his money and wants back in. Using a billionaire to steal kids from their dad. Disgusting. Why didn't she fight for them 4 years ago? Day 14. My boss at Pete's Diner called. Becca, I'm so sorry. I have to let you go. What? Why? Someone called, said they'd sue me for employing you, said you're a danger to children. Pete, that's insane. I know, but I can't afford lawyers. I'm sorry. Day 15. Barnes & Noble manager called. Becca, corporate called. They're terminating your employment. On what grounds? Customer complaints. Apparently someone started a petition. This is illegal, and I'm sorry, it's out of my hands. Day 16. Eviction notice on my door. 30-day notice to vacate. Building has been sold to new ownership. Lease non-renewal. I called my landlord. Sam, what's going on? My lease isn't up for 6 months. I sold the building. New owner is cleaning house. I'm sorry. Who bought it? Pause. I can't say. I Googled the new LLC. Brightwell Holdings. Owner, Richard Brightwell, Tessa's father. Garrett had gotten to him. I called Diane sobbing. He's destroying me. Both jobs gone. Apartment gone. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. I can't fight this. Move in with us, Diane said immediately. Your husband. We'll deal with it. You're my sister. You're staying with us. I moved into Diane's basement with one suitcase. Everything I owned. Day 17, 1 week before the wedding. Dominic's board meeting at Ashford Analytics. His CFO reported the damage. Stock price is down 8% this week. Board members expressed concern. Shareholders are worried about the Sullivan Association. The optics are bad. Billionaire helping ex-wife steal children. She's not stealing anything, Dominic said. They're her biological children. The media doesn't care about facts. They care about narrative. The CFO made his recommendation. We're advising you to publicly distance yourself from Miss Monroe. No, if I saw, Dominic, be reasonable. I said no. That evening, Dominic visited me at Diane's house. I was in the basement, packing boxes. You shouldn't be here. Why not? Because I'm ruining your life. My stock price is not my life. Your board wants you to drop me. He sat on a folding chair. My board wants a lot of things. Doesn't mean I listen. I was crying. You're losing money because of me. Money grows back. Integrity doesn't. Why are you doing this? Because someone should have fought for you 4 years ago, and no one did. So I'm doing it now. I can't let you sacrifice everything. It's not a sacrifice. It's a choice. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing what's right. What if we lose? Then we lose together. But we're not going to lose. Day 19, 5 days before the wedding. Emergency custody hearing. Garrett's attorney had new evidence. Rick Morrison stood before the judge. Your Honor, we've uncovered disturbing information about Miss Monroe's mental state. Claire objected. Relevance? I'll allow it. Proceed. Miss Monroe has been under psychiatric care for 4 years. She's been diagnosed with PTSD, major depressive disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder. She's on 4 medications. He listed them. And 3 years ago, she was hospitalized after a suicide attempt. Gasps in the courtroom. I whispered to Claire. That was an accidental overdose. I mixed medications. I know, but they're framing it as, Morrison continued, Your Honor, Miss Monroe is unstable. Her own medical records show she's a danger to herself. How can we trust her with vulnerable children? Claire stood. Your Honor, Miss Monroe's PTSD is a direct result of abuse by Mr. Sullivan during their marriage. Her medical records show alleged abuse, never proven, never reported to police. Because she was terrified, the judge banged his gavel. Counsel, enough. He looked at me. Miss Monroe, did you attempt suicide 3 years ago? I was shaking. I accidentally took too much medication. I was exhausted, not thinking, did you or did you not require hospitalization and psychiatric hold? Yes, but are you currently on medication for depression and anxiety? Yes. Do you believe you are mentally capable of caring for 2 5-year-old children? My voice rose. He's the reason I needed medication. He abused me. He isolated me. He destroyed me. The bailiff stepped forward. Ma'am, please. I was screaming now. He stole my embryos. He made children without my consent. And now he's using my trauma against me. The judge banged his gavel. Miss Monroe, control yourself or I'll hold you in contempt. I collapsed, sobbing. Claire held me. The judge spoke after a long silence. I'm ordering a full psychiatric evaluation of Miss Monroe before any custody decision. Until that evaluation is complete, all visitation is suspended. Your Honor, please, Claire tried. My decision is final. We're adjourned. Outside the courthouse, paparazzi swarmed. I was on the ground, sobbing. Photographers circled like vultures. Dominic's security team shielded me. But the video was already uploading. Within 6 hours, 10 million views. Title, Crazy Ex-Wife Breaks Down in Court. Comments poured in. This woman is unhinged. Garrett was right to leave her. She needs help, not custody. That night at Diane's house, I was catatonic, staring at the wall. I lost them, I whispered. No, Diane started. I lost my babies. Dominic was on the phone with lawyers. What are our options? Claire's voice was grim. The psych eval will take 3 to 4 weeks. By then, the wedding will be over. The investment will be closed. Garrett will have more resources to fight. So we have 5 days. 5 days to do what? To end this. That night, Dominic called an emergency meeting at his penthouse. Midnight. The team assembled. Dominic, Robert, Sarah, Claire, me. I was barely present, exhausted, defeated. Dominic addressed the room. We're not waiting for the legal system anymore. Garrett Sullivan is getting married in 4 days. Richard Brightwell is investing $5 million the day after. We have 96 hours to destroy him. Dominic, we can't, Claire started. Legally, no, but there are other ways to win. The plan was audacious, possibly illegal, definitely risky. Phase 1 exposed the fraud. Sarah had completed the financial audit. Garrett's company was bankrupt. He'd lied to Brightwell. Get the real financials to Brightwell before the investment closed. Phase 2 exposed the theft. Robert had secured a surrogate testimony, forged, signature confirmed. Clinic director willing to admit Garrett misled them. Present evidence publicly at the wedding. Phase 3, show dominance. I would attend the wedding, not as a victim, not as a beggar, as a threat. I spoke quietly. He has the twins. The court won't let me see them. How does showing up help? Robert leaned forward. Because we're going to get the twins before the wedding. That's kidnapping. Not if you have legal custody. Claire shook her head. She doesn't have custody. The judge suspended visitation pending evaluation. But the original ruling granted her temporary custody rights. There is a 72-hour window where that ruling is still technically active. That's legally ambiguous. So we move in the ambiguity. The detailed plan emerged. Thursday, day 21. Robert's team picks up twins from school using the court order from day 7. Garrett calls police but can't prove kidnapping because the court order is valid. The police call it a civil custody dispute. No arrest. Friday, day 22. Sarah delivers financial audit to Richard Brightwell. Brightwell confronts Garrett. Garrett panics, distracted. Saturday, day 23. Wedding day. I arrive with twins and Dominic. Public, documented, undeniable. Shows I'm not unstable. I'm organized, supported, powerful. Forces Garrett to confront me in front of his social circle. I looked at Dominic, and if this backfires, it won't. But if it does, then I'll take the blame. I'll say I coerced you. You'll be fine. Don't. You're getting your children back. That's non-negotiable. Thursday afternoon, day 21, 3:15 p.m., Greenwich Elementary School. Robert's team waited in the parent pickup line. 3 people. Robert, Kate, a child psychologist hired by Dominic. Marcus, a security specialist. 3:30, school dismissal. Emma and Ethan exited with their nanny Sandra. Robert approached with paperwork. Sandra Morales? She was suspicious. Yes? I'm Robert Mitchell, representing Rebecca Monroe. This is a court order granting Miss Monroe temporary custody. He showed the document. I need to call Mr. Sullivan. You're welcome to do that, but the children are coming with us. Kate knelt to the children's level. Hi, Emma. Hi, Ethan. Do you remember Miss Becca? Emma brightened. The lady from the playroom? Yes, she's waiting to see you. She misses you so much. Ethan looked at Sandra. Is it okay? Sandra was on the phone with Garrett, frantic. Mr. Sullivan, there are people here with a court order. Yes, for the children. I don't know what to... Garrett's voice came through, shouting, Do not let them take my kids. Robert took the phone from Sandra. Mr. Sullivan, this is Robert Mitchell. We have a valid court order. If you interfere, you'll be in contempt. I'll call the police. Please do. They'll confirm this is a civil matter. He hung up. Police arrived 10 minutes later. The officer reviewed the court order, radioed for legal consultation. 30 minutes later, a police lieutenant arrived. The court order is valid. It's a civil matter. Let them go. Sandra was crying. Mr. Sullivan is going to kill me. The officer was sympathetic but firm. Ma'am, you have no legal authority to prevent this. Emma and Ethan were confused, scared. Kate spoke gently. It's okay, sweethearts. We're going to see Miss Becca. She has a surprise for you. They drove away. 4:30, Diane's house. I saw them arrive through the window. I ran out, fell to my knees on the lawn, sobbing. Hi, babies. Hi. I'm so happy to see you. Emma approached slowly. Are you crying? Happy tears. I'm just so happy you're here. Ethan was cautious. Daddy says we're going to his wedding tomorrow. I glanced at Dominic, who stood behind them. You are, and I'm coming too. That night, I tucked them into Diane's guest room. Emma asked the question I'd been dreading. Miss Becca, are you really our mommy? Yes, sweetheart. Then why don't we live with you? My heart broke into 1,000 pieces. It's complicated, baby, but I'm working on it. Ethan spoke up. Daddy says you left us. I chose my words carefully, gently. I never left you. I didn't know about you, but now I do, and I'm never letting you go again. Friday morning, day 22, day before the wedding, 10 a.m., Richard Brightwell's office in Manhattan. Sarah, the forensic accountant, arrived with files. Mr. Brightwell, I'm Sarah Mitchell. I have information about your investment in Sullivan Properties. I'm sorry, who are you? I'm a forensic accountant in Sullivan Properties is bankrupt. She laid out the files. Tax returns showing hidden debt, bank statements showing negative cash flow, property valuations inflated by 300%, loan default notices on 4 properties in foreclosure. Mr. Brightwell, Garrett Sullivan told you his company is worth $15 million. It's worth negative $3.2 million. If you invest $5 million tomorrow, you'll never see it again. Richard went pale. Where did you get this? A concerned party who doesn't want to see you defrauded. Who? Rebecca Monroe, Garrett's ex-wife. Richard immediately called Garrett. The conversation was explosive. Garrett panicked, tried to explain, made excuses. Richard cut him off. Is your company bankrupt? No, I mean, we have temporary cash flow issues. 4 properties in foreclosure? The market shifted. Did you lie to me about your financials? Long pause. Richard, let me explain. The investment is off. Don't contact me again. He hung up. Garrett immediately called Tessa. She was confused, upset. The wedding was tomorrow. Your father pulled the investment. What? Wait, I. Because of Becca, she's trying to destroy me. Garrett, the wedding is tomorrow. I know. We need to postpone. No, we're not postponing. We're getting married. I'll figure out the money. But the damage was done. Cracks were forming in Garrett's perfect facade. Saturday morning, wedding day, Dominic's penthouse in Tribeca. My transformation began at dawn. Hairstylist, professional blowout, elegant updo, makeup artist, natural but polished, emphasizing strength. Wardrobe consultant, the dress, Valentino emerald green silk, empire waist, flowing, $22,000. Jewelry, borrowed Cartier diamonds, earrings, bracelet, shoes, Jimmy Choo heels, paid for by Dominic. Emma and Ethan got the same treatment. Designer children's clothes, tailored overnight. Emma in an ivory dress with flowers. Ethan in a navy suit matching Dominic's. Noon. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. I looked powerful, wealthy, untouchable. Dominic entered. You look incredible. I look like someone else. You look like yourself, the version of you Garrett tried to kill. I'm terrified. Good, so is he. What if this doesn't work? It'll work. How do you know? Because we already won. He just doesn't know it yet. 12:30. 3 black SUVs departed for Teterboro Airport. Destination, the jet. The Gulfstream G650. Dominic's personal aircraft. Tail number N-1, worth $70 million. We were about to make an entrance Garrett would never forget. 2:47 p.m., Westchester County Airport. The Gulfstream touched down. Paparazzi were waiting. 12 photographers, 4 news crews. Dominic had tipped them off. Billionaire Dominic Ashford attending Garrett Sullivan wedding. The door opened, stairs extended. I stepped out into the afternoon sunlight. Emerald dress catching the light, diamond earrings glinting, Chanel sunglasses, confident stride I didn't feel. Emma and Ethan emerged beside me, one on each side, holding my hands. Designer clothes, shy but curious. Dominic followed, navy Tom Ford suit, power presence, sunglasses. Security team flanked us. 4 professionals, earpieces, coordinated movement. 3 black SUVs waited on the tarmac. We drove to the venue, 3 miles away, 255, the estate at Winding Hills. The wedding venue was spectacular. White tents, 200 guests, orchestra playing, champagne flowing. The ceremony started at 3. We were cutting it close. The SUVs pulled up to the main entrance. Guests on the lawn turned and stared. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Who's that? Is that Garrett's ex-wife? Those children? That's Dominic Ashford. Oh my God, she came in his private jet. I exited the SUV. Dominic helped Emma and Ethan out. We walked toward the venue. Garrett stood on the venue steps in his tuxedo, frozen. He saw me, looking like a billionaire's wife. He saw his children, who were supposed to be at his mother's house. He saw Dominic Ashford, the third richest man in New York, his face drained of color. Tessa stood beside him in her wedding dress. Garrett, who is that? He couldn't speak. Garrett, who are those children? I stopped at the bottom of the steps, locked eyes with Garrett, smiled, slow, confident, dangerous. Hi, Garrett. Thanks for the invitation. I brought guests. Hope that's okay. Silence. 200 guests staring, phones out, recording. Garrett descended the steps. His voice shook. What are you doing here? You invited me, remember? The twins should see their father's past and present come together. So here we are. He looked at Emma and Ethan. How did you, legal custody, Garrett. I'm their mother. You can't just take them. I didn't take them. The court gave them to me. Tessa descended the steps, horrified. Garrett, what is she talking about? Who are these children? Garrett turned to her, frantic. Baby, let me explain. I spoke to Tessa directly. He didn't tell you? Tell me what? That Emma and Ethan are his children. And mine. Gasps from the guests. Tessa's face went white. What? We created embryos during our marriage. IVF. After the divorce, Garrett was supposed to destroy them. Instead, he used them. Without my consent, without telling me. He forged my signature, and he's been raising my biological children for 5 years. Richard Brightwell pushed through the crowd. Garrett, is this true? Or are you? Garrett backed up the steps. Richard, she's lying. Dominic stepped forward. Mr. Brightwell, I'm Dominic Ashford. We spoke yesterday through my associate. Everything Miss Monroe just said is documented. DNA tests, court records, forged signatures. Your son-in-law is a fraud. Richard turned to Tessa. We're leaving. Now. Tessa was crying. You used her embryos without telling her? I was going to tell you. When? After we were married? Baby, please. Tessa removed her veil, threw it at him. We're done. Tessa addressed the guests through tears. I'm sorry, there's not going to be a wedding. She walked away with her father and family. Garrett turned on me, fury in his eyes. You destroyed my life. I remained calm. No, I stopped you from destroying anyone else's. Those are my children. They're my eggs, my DNA, my body. You had no right. He lunged toward me. I gave them life. Dominic's security tackled him before he could reach me. Garrett was on the ground, restrained. Get off me! Patricia Sullivan, Garrett's mother, walked over. She looked at me. I'm sorry. I was shocked. What? I knew about the embryos. He told me. I should have said something. I should have stopped him. I'm so sorry. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called 911. Officers arrived, assessed the situation. Garrett was being held by security. She kidnapped my children. I handed the officer documents calmly. I have legal custody. DNA tests, court orders, everything's here. The officer reviewed the paperwork. This is a civil matter. Both of you need to lawyer up. Dominic stepped forward. Officer, Mr. Sullivan committed identity theft and embryo fraud. We have documentation. He handed over another folder. The officer radioed in. I need a detective on site, possible fraud case. Garrett looked at me. Desperate now. Please, please don't do this. You should have thought about that 5 years ago. Emma tugged my dress. Miss Becca, I'm scared. I knelt down. It's okay, baby. We're going home. Home with you? Tears streamed down my face. Yes, sweetheart. Home with me. The guests were leaving in droves. The wedding of the year had become a scandal. Patricia approached me one more time before leaving. They deserve you. I see that now. I'm sorry it took me so long. Detectives arrived. took statements, reviewed documents. Garrett was questioned extensively. Within hours, criminal charges were filed. Identity theft, fraud, unlawful use of genetic material. The media coverage was immediate and massive, but this time the narrative was different. Real estate mogul Garrett Sullivan arrested on fraud charges. Billionaire Dominic Ashford helps ex-wife expose embryo theft. DNA tests proved children were created without mother's consent. The court of public opinion shifted overnight. Suddenly, I wasn't the crazy ex-wife. I was the mother who'd been stolen from. And Garrett? He was the monster who'd stolen her children. 3 days later, emergency custody hearing. This time, the judge reviewed all the evidence. The forged signatures, the date tests, the criminal charges. Mr. Sullivan, you have committed serious crimes. Until your criminal trial concludes, I'm granting Miss Monroe full temporary custody of Emma and Ethan Sullivan. You will have no contact with the children pending criminal proceedings. Garrett's attorney tried to object, but there was nothing left to argue. Outside the courthouse, I held my children's hands. No paparazzi this time. Just us. And Dominic and Diane. What happens now? Emma asked. Now, I said, we go home. Where's home? I looked at Dominic. He'd already made the arrangements. A house in Connecticut, near good schools, 3 bedrooms. Modest but safe. I'll show you, I said. 6 months later, the house in Stamford, Connecticut wasn't much. 3 bedrooms, small yard, outdated kitchen. But it was ours. Emma and Ethan had their own rooms, decorated them with help from Diane's kids. Slowly, hesitantly, they began to call me Mom instead of Miss Becca. Garrett pleaded guilty to avoid trial. 18 months in prison. He'd serve 11 with good behavior. The civil custody case concluded quickly once the criminal conviction came through. Full legal and physical custody granted to me. Garrett would have supervised visitation after his release. 2 hours every other week. If the kids wanted it, they would get to decide. I started working as a freelance art consultant. Dominic helped me open a small gallery in Stamford. Part owner, part investor, mostly friend. Emma and Ethan were in therapy. So was I. We were all healing, slowly. One Saturday morning, I watched them play in the backyard through the kitchen window. Diane was visiting. She'd brought coffee and bagels. You did it? She said. Did what? You got them back. Yeah, I did. Pause. Are you happy? I thought about it. I don't know if I'm happy yet, but I'm not broken anymore, and that's something. The doorbell rang. I opened it. Tessa stood there, nervous, thin, tired. Tessa? Hi, I'm sorry to just show up. I wasn't sure you'd answer if I called. What do you want? To apologize. Diane called from the kitchen. This should be good. I turned back. Give us a minute. Tessa and I sat on the porch steps. I didn't know, she said, about the embryos, about what he did to you. I know. I thought he left you because you two grew apart. He told me you were okay with this separation, that it was mutual. It wasn't. I know that now. Silence. He used me too, you know, my father's money, my family's connections. I was just another asset to him. I'm sorry. She looked surprised. You're sorry? I helped destroy your marriage. He destroyed the marriage. You were just there. Tessa started crying. I looked up to you, you know, at the gallery. You were so confident, so talented, and I thought I was taking something from you. But really, I was just taking your nightmare. Are you okay? I moved back to California, started over. Therapy, a lot of therapy. Good. She stood to leave. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry, and I'm glad you got your children back. They deserve you. Thank you. She walked to her car, turned back. You're stronger than I ever was. You'd be surprised what you can survive. Sunday evening, Dominic arrived for dinner. Emma and Ethan hugged him. Uncle Dom! Hey, kiddos, I brought ice cream. I laughed. You always bring ice cream. That's because I'm the fun one. Dinner was simple. Pasta, salad, garlic bread, home-cooked, warm. Emma asked if they could have ice cream before dinner. I said no. After dinner. Ethan tried to get Dominic to overrule me. Dominic said, I said your mom's the boss, always. After dinner, the twins watched a movie in the living room. Dominic and I sat on the back porch. You seem good, he said. I'm getting there. The custody battle's over. Garrett's supervised visits are going okay. He shows up. He's trying, but the kids are distant with him. They'll figure it out. Yeah. Pause. I've been thinking, I said. About? About that day, the wedding, the jet, all of it. And? People ask me, Mommy, if it felt like revenge. What do you tell them? That revenge isn't the right word. What is? Justice, not for me, for them. I gestured to the kids inside. Do you regret it? Going to the wedding? The spectacle? No, because if I hadn't, I'd still be fighting in court. I'd still be the unstable ex-wife. Instead, I showed up as someone who couldn't be dismissed. You showed up as yourself. The version of myself he tried to kill. We sat in comfortable silence. Thank you, Dom. For what? For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. You would have found your way. Maybe, but it would have taken longer. Emma called from inside. Mom, the movie's over. Can we have ice cream now? I laughed. Coming? People love a good revenge story. The scorned ex-wife who shows up at her ex-husband's wedding in a private jet and destroys him. But this wasn't a revenge story. It was a rescue mission. I didn't arrive at that wedding to hurt Garrett. I arrived to take back what he stole. My children, my dignity, my life. Did I enjoy watching him crumble? Honestly, a little. But what I enjoyed more was this, watching Emma and Ethan laugh without looking over their shoulders, tucking them into bed every night, being their mother. Garrett gave them life, but I gave them love. And in the end, that's what mattered. He stole 5 years from us, but he doesn't get to steal the rest. 2 years after the wedding that never happened, I stood in my gallery in Stamford. Small space, 1,200 square feet, but it was mine. Well, mine and Dominic's. He'd invested, I'd managed. Together, we'd built something good. The featured artist this month was local, a woman who'd survived domestic violence and started painting as therapy. Her work was raw, powerful, honest. The opening reception was tonight. People were arriving. Emma and Ethan were there, dressed up, helping hand out programs. They were 7 now. Taller, smarter, funnier. They knew their story. We told them everything, age appropriately. They knew about the embryos, about what Garrett had done, about the legal fight. They called me Mom. They called Garrett by his first name during their supervised visits twice a month. They called Dominic Uncle Dom. Patricia, Garrett's mother, visited sometimes. She tried to rebuild a relationship with the kids. Slowly, they'd accepted her. She was their grandmother, after all. Garrett had been released from prison 6 months ago. The visits were awkward but civil. He was trying to be better. Maybe he'd succeed. Maybe he wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. Diane arrived at the gallery with her family. Her kids were running around, excited by the art. This place looks great, she said. Thanks. We've been busy. How are you? Really? I looked around, at my gallery, at my children, at the life I'd rebuilt from nothing. I'm good, actually good. You earned it. Dominic arrived late, apologizing. Work thing. He greeted Emma and Ethan with his usual bear hugs. Then he pulled me aside. I have news. What? The investors from the tech conference? They want to expand our platform. They're offering partnership opportunities. Dom, I already told them you're not interested, but I wanted you to know you have options, always. Why do you do this? Do what? Keep opening doors for me. Because you deserve them, and because you're my friend, and friends show up. Later that evening, after the reception ended, after the guests left, after Emma and Ethan fell asleep in the car on the drive home, I stood in my kitchen making tea. The house was quiet, peaceful. I thought about the woman I'd been 4 years ago, broken, destroyed, barely surviving. I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago, desperate, fighting, terrified of losing. And I thought about the woman I was now, whole, healing, free. The private jet arrival at Garrett's wedding had made headlines. The photos went viral. The story spread across social media. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was what came after. The slow, steady work of building a life, of raising children, of healing trauma, of forgiving myself for all the years I'd believed Garrett's lies about who I was. I'd spent so long thinking I wasn't enough, wasn't pretty enough, smart enough, interesting enough, worthy enough. But I'd learned something in the past 2 years. Garrett's opinion of me was never the truth. It was his tool for control, his weapon for keeping me small. And once I stopped believing it, once I stopped trying to earn his approval, I became unstoppable. Not because of Dominic's money, not because of the jet or the dress or the dramatic entrance, but because I remembered who I was before Garrett told me I wasn't. 3 years after the wedding, Emma was 8, Ethan was 8. They were in third grade, same class, different friend groups. Emma lost, drew constantly, filled sketchbooks with dragons and castles and imaginary worlds. Ethan loved math, did puzzles for fun, asked questions about patterns and probabilities. They were their own people, not mini versions of me or Garrett, just themselves. One night, Emma asked me a question I'd been dreading. "Mom, why did Daddy make us without asking you?" I chose my words carefully. He wanted children very badly, and he made a choice that hurt a lot of people, including me, including you and Ethan. But we're here now. You are, and I'm so grateful for that. Are you glad he made us, even though he was bad? I pulled her close. I'm glad you exist. I would have wanted you no matter what, but I wish I'd been there from the beginning. We wish that too. Ethan joined us, but you're here now. That's what matters, right? Right. And Daddy's learning to be better. His therapist said so. I didn't know what to say to that. Garrett was in therapy, part of his parole requirements. Whether he was actually getting better, time would tell. But my children were kind enough to hope, and I wouldn't take that from them. 5 years after the wedding, Emma was 10, Ethan was 10. They were thriving. Honor roll students. Emma in advanced art classes, Ethan in advanced math. The gallery was successful. We'd expanded to 2 locations. Dominic had taken a step back as I'd taken more control. It was my business now, my success. I'd started dating. Nothing serious, a few dinners, a few movies, testing the waters of trusting someone new. It was terrifying, but also necessary. Garrett had been out of prison for 4 years. The supervised visits had gradually become unsupervised. He had proven himself stable, reliable, changed. Maybe, probably, possibly. The kids spent every other weekend with him now. They called him Dad sometimes. Other times still Garrett. They were figuring it out. Patricia had become a real grandmother, present, loving. She'd apologized 1,000 times for not stopping Garrett 5 years ago. I'd forgiven her. Mostly. Diane's kids were teenagers now. Loud, dramatic, wonderful. Dominic was still my closest friend. No romance. Just friendship. Deep, enduring, real. He'd met someone, a nice woman who worked in sustainable agriculture. They were serious. I was happy for him. One Sunday evening, I sat on my back porch alone. Emma and Ethan were at Garrett's house for the weekend. The house was quiet. I thought about the journey from that morning 4 years ago when I received the wedding invitation to now. From desperation to determination to victory to healing. It hadn't been clean. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been a fairy tale. But it had been mine. The question people ask most often is, do you regret it? The drama, the confrontation, the public spectacle. My answer is always the same. No, because sometimes the only way to fight a monster is to become undismissible, to show up in a way that cannot be ignored, cannot be dismissed, cannot be erased. Garrett had spent years making me invisible, making me small, making me nothing, and I'd let him. But the day I stepped off that private jet with my children, I stopped being invisible. I became a woman who fought back, who stood up, who said no, not for revenge, not for drama, not for spectacle, for justice, for truth, for my children. And that made all the difference. The final truth? I'm not the broken woman Garrett left behind. I'm not the victim in his story. I'm the woman who arrived in a billionaire's jet with her stolen children and walked away free. I'm the mother who fought through hell to get her babies back. I'm the survivor who rebuilt her life from ruins. And that's everything. Garrett Sullivan served 11 months in prison. He was released on parole and now works in property management. He has supervised visitation with Emma and Ethan twice a month. He remarried 2 years ago. They seem happy. Tessa Brightwell moved to California. She completed a master's degree in social work. She specializes in helping women leave abusive relationships. Patricia Sullivan established a foundation supporting embryo donor rights and ethical fertility practices. She sees her grandchildren regularly. Dominic Ashford married the sustainable agriculture specialist. They have one daughter. He remains my business partner and closest friend. Richard Brightwell never invested in another real estate venture. He focuses on early-stage tech companies now. Emma and Ethan are now 10 years old. They know their full story. They know their mother fought for them. They know they were wanted. They know they are loved. They call me mom. And that's all I ever wanted.